On the remote volcanic island of Jeju, South Korea, where the sharp scent of pine hangs in the crisp autumn air and the ocean's restless rhythm beats against rocky cliffs, a solitary red fox named Ember moves cautiously through the forest floor. His fur glows like embers in the low light of dawn, rich russet fading to white at his paws. But his steps are uneven, unsteady. His head tilts slightly to one side, a subtle but constant wobble betraying the silent enemy he fights within, a persistent ear infection that unsettles his balance, fraying his once perfect coordination. Unlike the harsh cries of predators or the alarm calls of prey, Ember's suffering is wordless. He does not howl or whimper. His distress lies hidden in the careful placement of his paws, the slower pace, the fleeting moments when his amber eyes cloud with fatigue. Each day brings a new challenge: to move without faltering, to hunt without giving away his weakness, to survive while quietly breaking. This infection does more than cause physical imbalance. It isolates Ember from his natural world. The sharp scent trails he once followed become confusing maps. His instincts waver between caution and fear. In a place where silence is survival and every sound carries meaning, his quiet struggle is an invisible fracture beneath a dignified mask. Before we continue, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're already feeling drawn into Ember's story, imagine how the next part will move you. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. On the outskirts of this rugged wilderness lives Hana Kim, a wildlife rehabilitator with years of gentle experience caring for the island's fragile creatures. Her small wooden home blends into the landscape, surrounded by native plants and stone paths weathered by ocean winds. But beneath her quiet routine lies a well of tender vulnerability, a wound left by the loss of her younger brother, who battled a similar silent decline in health, losing his balance and voice until the world seemed to fade around him. Hana's hands have steadied countless trembling animals, yet the memory of her brother's slow, quiet suffering lingers with her, shaping her resolve to witness and honor pain that others overlook. The connection between her grief and Ember's invisible burden creates an unspoken thread, tying their stories across species and silence. This morning, as the first pale light filters through the pine branches and the forest breathes in slow, misty sighs, Hana senses something fragile stirring near the boundary of the wild and the cultivated. The air is cool, redolent with damp earth and resin, carrying the faintest trace of a wild presence. She moves slowly, mindful not to disturb the quiet pulse of the forest. Then, through a veil of fallen leaves, amber eyes catch the light, watchful, wary, and deeply tired. Ember is there, his posture cautious, his steps measured but uncertain. The fox pauses, head cocked slightly, as if weighing whether this human presence holds threat or promise. For a moment, time stills between them, the wild and the human, each holding silent stories of pain, endurance, and hope. Hana's breath slows, her heart opening to the invisible weight Ember carries, to the shared loneliness that echoes in their gazes. Her fingers tighten around a small satchel of herbs and medical supplies, tools of care that feel both powerful and fragile in the face of nature's quiet laws. She knows this moment marks the beginning of a delicate dance, one where trust will have to be earned, boundaries respected, and patience stretched beyond comfort. No dramatic rescue will define this story. Instead, it will be a slow unfolding, a testament to quiet, courage, to the spaces where healing happens in silence, and to the profound ways we connect when words fall away. The forest breathed in a slow, steady rhythm beneath the soft light of mid-morning. On Jeju Island, late autumn was a season of hushed transitions, when the fiery maples relinquished their leaves, scattering a carpet of gold and crimson over the mossy volcanic soil. The air was thick with the scent of damp pine needles and rich earth, tinged with a faint salty tang from the nearby ocean, a constant distant pulse that framed the wild landscape. A thin mist curled around the gnarled trunks of ancient trees, weaving through a tapestry of ferns and tangled brush. Light filtered in shards through the canopy, dappling the forest floor with shifting pools of warmth and shadow. The subtle crackle of dry leaves underfoot was punctuated by the occasional call of a distant magpie or the rustle of a small animal darting unseen through undergrowth. In this secluded world, life moved with quiet precision. Here, the red fox Ember was a part of the rhythm, an integral thread in the web of Jeju's fragile ecosystem. Despite his faltering steps, he navigated the terrain with a careful grace. His amber eyes flickered constantly, scanning for movement, scents, and signs of both danger and sustenance. His thick coat, blending russet and white, absorbed the muted light, making him a ghost in the shifting hues of autumn. For a moment, Ember paused beside a shallow stream that traced a jagged path through the rocks. The cold water gurgled softly, breaking over pebbles smoothed by countless seasons. He lowered his head slowly, tongue flicking at the surface, careful to keep balance even as his world tilted unpredictably. The infection deep within his ear sent ripples of discomfort through his nerves, but he drank with quiet determination. Survival was a fragile thread, stretched thin by unseen pain. The fox's movements betrayed no desperation, only a steady resolve. His survival depended on patience and restraint, not loud cries or frantic bursts. The subtle tremor in his step was a secret he carried alone, silent proof of a battle waged in the shadows. Around him, the forest carried other stories, of birds preparing for migration, of squirrels burying their last acorns, of ancient trees standing sentinel over the changing season. Each creature moved according to the cycles written in their blood, each aware of the delicate balance between endurance and surrender. Ember's presence was both ordinary and extraordinary in this context. Red foxes were solitary hunters, known for their cunning and adaptability, their keen senses finely tuned to the forest's whispers. Yet this one bore a quiet vulnerability, a hidden fracture beneath his dignified exterior. The infection had altered his equilibrium, confusing the intricate dance of nerve signals that kept him steady on the rocky paths and soft leaf litter. Scientific studies tell us that ear infections in wild foxes often go unnoticed until they cause significant disability. The inner ear houses structures vital for balance and spatial orientation. When infected, these can disrupt the animal's ability to hunt and evade predators. Yet foxes, masters of discretion, rarely vocalize their distress. Instead, they rely on subtle changes in behavior, hesitation before a leap, the occasional stumble, prolonged resting periods, to mask their suffering from both prey and predator. As Ember moved deeper into the woods, his keen nose caught the faintest hint of human presence. Nearby, Hana Kim lingered at the edge of the forest, blending into the shadows of the garden she tended. She paused to breathe in the scent of pine and earth, the soft hum of life around her, filling the space where grief and hope met. Hana's eyes traced the shapes of the trees, following patterns invisible to most. She knew this land intimately, the shifting seasons, the language of the wind through the leaves, the whispered stories carried on the ocean breeze. Her connection to Jeju was more than geography. It was woven into her identity, shaped by culture, loss, and the quiet work of healing. Today, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The light softened as clouds drifted across the sun, and a cool breeze stirred the falling leaves. In this suspended moment, the wild and human worlds brushed against each other, separated by invisible threads of trust yet to be woven. Ember's eyes glinted again, flicking toward Hana's still figure, sensing but not yet understanding. In his silent way, he was an ancient spirit of the forest, a guardian cloaked in fur, bearing the marks of hardship with unspoken dignity. This peaceful interlude, though gentle, was fragile. The balance that held Ember upright was precarious. Each step carried the weight of uncertainty, each breath a quiet fight against an invisible foe. And yet there was beauty here, in the persistence of life, in the delicate interplay of light and shadow, in the unspoken stories shared between a wild fox and a human who would soon learn to see beyond the silence. Now the forest waits, as does Ember, for what is to come. Ember moved through his forest home with a quiet dignity that masked the daily challenges he faced. To an untrained eye, he was simply a red fox navigating the shifting floor of Jeju's autumn woods, his sleek coat catching shafts of filtered sunlight, his amber eyes sharp and watchful. But beneath that composed exterior lay a world tempered by subtle struggle and steadfast resilience. Red foxes are solitary by nature, each holding a territory they patrol with meticulous care. Ember's was a patchwork of rocky outcrops, dense pines, and bubbling streams, a landscape that offered both sanctuary and challenge. His keen senses once assured swift hunting and safe passage, but the relentless ear infection had begun to tilt his world in unpredictable ways. Balance, once effortless, now demanded conscious effort. As he paused beside a cluster of moss-covered stones, Ember's head tipped slightly, a reflexive shake that failed to steady the spinning sensation within his inner ear. This biological disruption, known as vestibular dysfunction, affects spatial awareness, causing disorientation and dizziness. For a creature dependent on precision and speed, this was a profound handicap. Yet Ember's response was not despair, but adaptation. He adjusted his gait, planting paws with cautious deliberation, relying more heavily on his keen nose and acute hearing to compensate. His body language conveyed this silent negotiation with pain and limitation. Ears flattened occasionally, eyes narrowed thoughtfully, tail held low yet steady. In the world of red foxes, survival hinges on subtlety and grace. Their hunting techniques blend stealth with bursts of agility, and their communication weaves through body postures and soft vocalizations, chirps, barks, and yips that rarely draw attention. Ember's silence was not weakness, it was a guarded strength, a way to shield vulnerability from both predators and rivals. Scientific observations reveal that foxes with vestibular issues often conceal their discomfort, minimizing movement and avoiding confrontations. Ember's days had slowed, marked by longer rests beneath sheltered thickets and hesitant forays in search of food. His energy conserved, every movement measured. This resilience mirrored a quiet wisdom, one that Hana, watching from afar, would come to recognize deeply. There was something profoundly human in Ember's stillness, an echo of those who carry unseen burdens with poise and courage. As the forest shifted toward the cusp of winter, the light softened to a pale gold. The cold air carried a faint tang of sea salt mingled with pine resin, and the ground beneath Ember's paws was layered with crisp leaves and scattered pine cones. The season's change signaled both an ending and a preparation for renewal, a cycle Ember embodied despite his affliction. Hana's thoughts often turned to her brother, whose slow decline had been marked by silent suffering and quiet strength. Like Ember, he had learned to navigate imbalance and pain with a dignity that inspired without complaint. It was this shared endurance that formed the invisible thread between them, two lives shaped by hardship, yet bound by an unspoken hope. In the stillness, Ember became more than a wild animal. He was a living testament to persistence. His cautious movements, his moments of pause, and the thoughtful gaze that swept across his domain spoke of a creature who refused to be defined by weakness. Biologists note that red foxes possess remarkable adaptability, thriving in diverse habitats from dense forests to urban fringes. Their intelligence and curiosity drive problem-solving behaviors, and their social interactions, though limited, reveal complex emotional undercurrents. Ember's solitary existence was nuanced by these traits. His keen awareness of changes in weather, the distant calls of other foxes marking territories, the subtle shifts in scent carried by the wind. Even as the infection challenged his physical capacities, his instincts remained sharp. He used scent markings to navigate his territory, relying on memory and smell to compensate for moments when dizziness clouded his balance. His nose twitched at the faintest hint of prey, and his eyes tracked shadows with focused patience. This intricate balance between biology and emotion would become the foundation for the unfolding story, and thud. Exploration of how creatures, human and wild alike, find meaning and connection amidst adversity. Ember's world was silent, yes, but rich with detail. The crunch of frost underfoot, the warm sun on his fur during brief midday rests, the scent of rain on stone before a storm. Each sensory fragment was a thread woven into the fabric of his experience, grounding him even as his body wavered. In this way, Ember taught a quiet lesson, that resilience is not loud or triumphant, but subtle and enduring. It lives in the small acts of persistence, in the steady breath drawn through pain, in the unwavering commitment to move forward. As dusk approached and the forest dimmed beneath a twilight sky, Ember curled beneath a thicket of evergreen boughs. His eyes closed briefly, not in surrender, but in momentary reprieve, a calm center amid the shifting chaos within. This was his world, one of quiet grace, profound dignity, and a resilience that would not be broken. The forest held its breath in the cold stillness of early morning. A thin veil of fog clung low to the moss-covered stones and tangled roots, softening every sound to a whisper. Through this muted world, Ember moved with deliberate care, each step a quiet negotiation between instinct and pain. His head tilted ever so slightly to the right, the subtle wobble unrelenting, an invisible weight pressing against his balance. Inside his ear, inflammation raged, an infection that gnawed away at the intricate structures governing his equilibrium. This condition, vestibular disease, robbed him of certainty in a world where hesitation could mean death. Yet Ember never cried out in distress. His suffering was a silent endurance, a quiet determination to continue despite the slow unraveling within. Scientific studies of wild canids with vestibular dysfunction describe a cascade of physical challenges: nausea, disorientation, head tilting, and impaired coordination. For a fox, these symptoms are perilous, compromising hunting skills and evasion from predators. But nature's creatures rarely show vulnerability openly. Survival depends on masking weakness. Ember's amber eyes reflected a mixture of fatigue and fierce resolve. When dizziness seized him, he would pause, pressing his body low against the damp earth, ears twitching to gather steady sounds amid the spinning chaos. His breathing slowed, a conscious effort to regain composure. The forest's scent, the resin of pines, the wet stone, the musky odor of damp leaves, became his anchor. To an outsider, Ember might appear slowed or withdrawn, but in his mind, every motion was an act of bravery. He adapted his movements, taking shorter steps, leaning into the slope when climbing rocky terrain, avoiding leaps that once came easily. His hunting strategy shifted from swift ambush to careful stalking, patience replacing speed. This resilience bore dignity. Ember's refusal to give in, to howl or panic, was a testament to a strength rarely witnessed but deeply understood by those who watch quietly. Nearby, the forest stirred with the subtle rhythms of life. The chirp of a lone cicada, the rustle of a squirrel gathering nuts, the distant flap of a crow's wings. These sounds wove a gentle backdrop, emphasizing the contrast between Ember's internal turmoil and the world's unchanging flow. Hana Kim observed from a shaded clearing, the cool air crisp against her skin. She carried the memory of her brother's silent struggle like a quiet ache, how he too bore his pain without complaint, how the slow loss of balance and voice isolated him even among loved ones. Her knowledge of vestibular disease in foxes deepened her empathy. She knew the neurological chaos Ember endured, the constant conflict between the signals from his inflamed ear and the rest of his nervous system, the nausea that must have accompanied each shift in position. She imagined the fox's world spinning beneath him, the uncertainty lacing every step. But even as she recognized his vulnerability, Hannah admired his perseverance. Ember was not broken. He was adapting, embodying a quiet wisdom in the face of adversity. This moment was not one of dramatic rescue or loud cries for help. It was an unfolding of subtle truths. Suffering need not be shouted to be real, and resilience often resides in the spaces between pain and survival. As Ember moved, his body language conveyed complex emotions, alertness tempered by fatigue, caution tempered by the need to forage. His ears flicked toward distant sounds, muscles tensed for movement, eyes scanning for danger. Every instinct was alive, even as his body faltered. Hannah's heart tightened with a mixture of hope and sorrow. She understood the ethical tension that lay ahead. When does intervention become necessary, and when does respect for wildness mean letting nature take its course? She wrestled with these questions silently, knowing that every choice carried weight. Nearby, a local conservationist named Ji Hoon voiced a differing perspective. He cautioned against human interference, warning that well-intentioned actions could disrupt fragile ecosystems or foster dependency. Their conversations revealed the complexity of balancing compassion with conservation, a debate without easy answers. Yet Hannah felt a pull deeper than theory, a call to witness, to accompany Ember in his silent journey, to offer presence if not promises. In the cool fog, Ember paused by a fallen log, his gaze distant but steady. He was both part of this forest and apart from it, caught between the demands of survival and the too ill of his condition. The infection's shadow stretched long, but so did his quiet defiance. Hope remained, not in loud declarations, but in the patient rhythm of breath and step, in the fragile trust beginning to stir between fox and human. And so, in the heart of Jeju's autumn forest, a story of silent endurance and tentative connection took its first fragile breath. Hannah Kim moved through her small home on Jeju Island with a careful, measured grace. The morning light filtered softly through papered windows, casting pale patterns onto the wooden floorboards, worn smooth by years of quiet footsteps. Outside, the island's wild voice whispered through the pines, the scent of salt and resin mingling in the crisp autumn air. Yet inside, Hannah carried a weight that no scenery could ease. Her hands trembled slightly as she filled a ceramic bowl with warm water, preparing herbs steeped in tradition and science. Years of training had honed her skill as a wildlife rehabilitator, but the true strength beneath her calm was a tender vulnerability, one born of a loss too profound for words. Her younger brother, Minjae, had suffered a slow decline that stole his balance and voice. A mysterious illness, invisible to most, had rendered him fragile and silent, leaving Hannah to bear witness to his fading with helpless love. The quietness that had engulfed Minjae now echoed in every fragile creature Hannah sought to heal, binding her to their suffering in ways her work alone could never explain. Jeju's culture taught reverence for nature's rhythms. The gaksi, or spirit guardians, whispered through the rustling leaves, reminding her that healing was not a hurried task, but a sacred dance with time and patience. Hannah carried these lessons like an anchor, guiding her hands and heart as she prepared to meet a new kind of patient. Her attention shifted to the small enclosure at the edge of her garden, where a gentle fox had been spotted, an animal moving with unusual care, its head tilted as if the world itself were unsteady beneath it. The connection was immediate, unspoken. Ember's silent struggle reflected the memories she carried, his dignity mirroring the quiet bravery she had witnessed in Minjae. Hana's voice was barely a whisper as she spoke to herself. This isn't just about saving an animal. It's about witnessing pain that no one else sees. It's about being present. Her days were not heroic or grandiose. They were filled with small acts of care, mixing herbal salves, patching wounds, observing signs of improvement or decline. Yet beneath these routines lay an emotional complexity she rarely voiced. She wrestled with questions that defied easy answers. When should she intervene? How could she balance her desire to help with respect for Ember's wild nature? What price might come from crossing the boundary between observer and caregiver? Ji-hoon, a local conservationist and longtime friend, often challenged her on these points. The forest has its own wisdom, he would say. Sometimes interference disrupts what we don't fully understand. Their debates were gentle but persistent, reflecting the ethical tensions embedded in every choice Hana faced. She valued Ji-hoon's perspective, yet her heart ached with a different truth, that sometimes the broken save the broken. This tension lived within her, a silent dialogue of hope and doubt, care and caution. Hana's body carried the imprint of this burden. At night, she would lie awake, the memory of her brother's fading balance and voice stirring a quiet ache beneath her ribs. Yet each morning she rose with renewed resolve, fueled by the belief that presence mattered more than action. Her relationship with the island deepened her sense of responsibility. Jeju was not merely a place, but a living being, its forests and creatures bound in thud, cycles of life, death, and renewal. To care for Ember was to engage with this intricate web, to honor not only his suffering, but the whole ecosystem that shaped him. In a quiet moment, Hana stood at her porch, eyes tracing the distant forest where Ember moved like a ghost. The cold breeze tugged at her jacket, carrying the scent of damp earth and sea. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her own grief and the fragile hope that tethered her to this fox. There was no certainty in what lay ahead, only the slow unfolding of trust, the tentative bridge between human and wild. This was her gift and her challenge, to listen with more than ears, to see with more than eyes, to heal not just the body, but the silence within. As Hana prepared her herbs and tools, the distant rustle of leaves reminded her that the forest watched as well. The natural world demanded patience and respect, qualities Hana hoped to embody in the coming days. Her care was not a cure, but an offering, a promise to accompany Ember through his quiet struggle, honoring the grace in endurance. And so, beneath Jeju's shifting skies and ancient trees, two lives, one human, one wild, began a fragile journey of mutual healing, bound by silence and presence. The late afternoon sun hung low over Jeju Island, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers through the thinning canopy. The forest was awash in soft golden light, dappled and shifting as leaves fluttered in a gentle breeze. The air held the scent of pine resin and moist earth, mingling with the faint saltiness drifting from the distant sea. It was a time when the world seemed to pause, a moment suspended between the fading warmth of day and the cool promise of evening. At the edge of a small clearing, Ember moved slowly, each step deliberate yet faltering. His head tipped at a slight angle, the subtle tilt betraying the invisible enemy that unsettled his balance. His amber eyes scanned the undergrowth, sharp and alert, yet tinged with cautious wariness. The forest was his realm, a place of instinct and survival. Whining. Yet today something new disturbed its familiar rhythms. Hidden behind a cluster of low bushes, Hana watched silently, her breath steady despite the quickening beat of her heart. She had come to know this fox in fleeting glimpses, a shadow among shadows, and now, from a distance, the space between them felt charged with possibility. The delicate balance of trust and fear hovered like mist. Ember's gaze flicked toward the faint rustle near the bushes, his body tensed, ears flattened slightly against his head. He knew the scent carried the unmistakable trace of human presence, something both foreign and strangely familiar. His natural instinct was to flee, to vanish into the dense forest where safety lay in invisibility. Yet something held him rooted, a flicker of curiosity mingling with his caution. In the silence, the two beings shared a moment, not of words, but of measured understanding. Hana's eyes softened, conveying patience rather than threat. She lowered her body, shrinking into the earth's embrace, signaling that she would not pursue or startle. The forest seemed to lean in, attentive to this fragile encounter. A nearby stream babbled softly, its cool waters a gentle soundtrack to the tension. Leaves rustled lightly as a breeze shifted, carrying distant bird calls that punctuated the quiet. Ember's gaze lingered longer than before, searching the eyes that met his, eyes that bore no sudden movements or harsh intentions. In those human eyes, he glimpsed something rare, a promise of gentleness, an unspoken vow of respect. This was no hurried rescue or forceful capture. It was the genesis of trust, a delicate thread weaving between wild and human, strengthened by silence and shared vulnerability. Biologically, foxes are cautious creatures, attuned to every shift in their environment. They communicate much through body language, tail position, ear orientation, subtle shifts in posture, signals finely tuned over millennia. Ember's lowered head, steady gaze, and slow steps conveyed a wary openness, a readiness to assess without immediate retreat. Hana, for her part, understood the unspoken language. Years of observation and care had taught her to listen beyond sound, to read the stories written in stillness. Her heart pulsed with both hope and respect for Ember's autonomy. Nearby, the forest floor was carpeted with pine needles and fallen leaves, their crisp textures underfoot a reminder of the season's relentless march. The air was cool, carrying hints of an approaching evening chill. Light filtered through gaps in the trees, casting patchy warmth on Hana's face. Despite the quiet, tension hummed beneath the surface, a fragile dance where one misstep could unravel the delicate trust forming between them. Hana felt a familiar surge of hesitation. Could she bridge this divide without frightening him away? Could she honor his wildness while offering the care he so desperately needed? The questions lingered, unanswered but alive, weaving through the forest like the soft breeze. Ember, for his part, took a small step forward, a tentative gesture of curiosity and cautious hope. His senses reached out, the faint scent of herbs on Hana's hands, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warm presence that did not press or demand. In this shared stillness, both knew that the journey ahead would require patience, respect, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. The golden light faded slowly, shadows deepening as dusk approached. The forest settled into its evening song, a chorus of crickets and distant owl calls weaving through the trees. And as night began to fold over Jeju Island, Ember and Hana held their place across the divide. Two souls poised on the brink of connection, bound by silence and the unspoken promise of trust. The forest held its breath beneath a sky slowly deepening to twilight. The fading sun cast a gentle glow across the mossy floor, where shadows lengthened and softened, mingling with the first flickers of evening stars. The air cooled, carrying the subtle fragrance of pine and damp earth, while a quiet hush settled over Jeju's ancient woods, a sacred pause between day and night. In a small clearing rimmed by ferns, Ember stood motionless, eyes fixed on the figure sitting patiently just beyond the edge of the underbrush. Hana's presence was steady and unthreatening. She sat quietly on a worn log, her movements slow and deliberate, hands resting loosely in her lap. Her amber gaze met Ember's without a word, communicating a promise deeper than speech, a vow to honor his space and pain. For moments that stretched between heartbeats, time seemed to fold inward. No sounds broke the delicate silence except the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl awakening to the night. In this stillness, something profound unfolded, an understanding beyond language, a bridge spanning the divide between human and wild. Ember's body relaxed slightly. His ears twitched, no longer flattened in fear, but alert and attentive. The familiar tremor of imbalance lingered, yet it no longer held him captive. His amber eyes, reflecting the fading light, shimmered with a tentative trust, a rare gift he offered not lightly. Hana's breath slowed to match the rhythm of the forest. She felt the weight of this moment deep in her chest, the fragile bloom of connection forged through patience and presence. Years of caring for wild creatures had taught her to recognize these silent exchanges, the subtle shift when fear yields to acceptance. This was the heartbeat of healing, trust born in silence. Biologically, red foxes rely heavily on body language to navigate social and environmental interactions. Their tail positions, ear orientations, and eye contact signal intentions and emotions. Ember's steady gaze, the gentle lowering of his head, and the absence of flight were powerful indicators of his choice, to engage, to trust. For Hana, this moment crystallized the reason she had come, to accompany Ember's journey with respect, to offer care without coercion, to witness suffering without erasing it. Their shared silence was a conversation deeper than words, layered with empathy and understanding. Ember was no longer just a creature in pain. He was a partner in an unfolding story, a story where healing would arise not from hurried action but from steady companionship. Around them the forest seemed to lean closer, the cool evening air humming with quiet life. The scent of pine resin mingled with the earthy aroma of damp leaves, a sensory embrace that wrapped them both in nature's solace. Hana's mind drifted to her brother, Minjae, the way he had taught her the value of presence over words, the power of silent support in the face of invisible struggle. Ember's trust echoed those lessons, reminding her that healing often begins not with dramatic rescue, but with being truly seen. As twilight deepened, Hana reached slowly into her bag, producing a small offering, pieces of dried meat, carefully prepared to tempt Ember's appetite without startling him. She placed it gently on a flat stone, the rustling sound soft but deliberate. Ember's nose twitched. The scent was familiar, safe. He approached cautiously, pausing several times to gauge Hana's reaction. When she remained still, eyes warm and steady, he took a tentative step forward, lowering himself to nibble the food. The moment was fragile and sacred, a dance of vulnerability and acceptance. With each bite, Ember's body language softened further. His tail lifted slightly, a subtle sign of comfort. Hana exhaled slowly, a silent prayer carried into the cooling air. This was trust in its purest form, not forced, not hurried, but chosen. Yet beneath this fragile peace lay the knowledge of difficult days ahead. Healing was a journey, not a destination. Ember's infection still haunted him, and Hana knew the path forward would test their resolve. But for now, in this suspended moment of mutual recognition, hope kindled quietly. As stars began to sprinkle the indigo sky, Hana felt a surge of gratitude for the fox's courage, for the forest's embrace, and for the unspoken bond that had blossomed between them. This was more than care. It was companionship. It was a promise whispered in the language of stillness. And so, with hearts aligned in silence, they sat beneath the ancient trees, two lives connected by trust and the slow, steady pulse of healing. If you've ever experienced a moment of perfect understanding with an animal, subscribe now to join others who believe connection transcends words. Tell me in the comments, what's the most profound moment you've shared with an animal? The sky had darkened to a deep navy, stars twinkling faintly above the quiet forest of Jeju Island. A soft wind carried the chill of approaching winter, rustling through the pines and sweeping fallen leaves along the forest floor. In her modest wooden home, Hana Kim sat by a low table scattered with herbal tinctures and carefully folded cloths. The soft glow of a single lantern cast warm shadows on her thoughtful face. Tonight, the weight of decision pressed heavily on her chest. Ember's silent struggle was no longer a distant concern. His faltering steps, the subtle head tilt, and those amber eyes reflecting quiet pain had woven themselves into her waking thoughts. Hana knew the delicate balance between respecting wildness and intervening with care. But every instinct urged her to act, to offer healing to the broken fox who had cautiously allowed her near. Yet fear crept in, shadowing hope. She was a wildlife rehabilitator, trained and experienced. But the risk was real. Would interference disrupt the fragile natural order? Could her efforts inadvertently do harm? The ethical complexity gnawed at her. Ji-hoon, the conservationist and old friend, had reminded her often that the forest had its own wisdom, a system far older and more intricate than any human understanding. "You must ask yourself," he had said softly, "when is the right time to step in? Sometimes letting go is the greatest kindness." Hana's gaze shifted to the window, where the dark silhouettes of trees swayed under the starlit sky. The answer was not simple. She thought of her brother Min-jae, whose illness had slowly stolen his balance and voice. The helplessness she had felt then was a quiet pain she carried still. Watching Ember falter stirred a fierce determination. This time she would not stand aside. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered supplies, herbal salves known for their anti-inflammatory properties, sterile gauze, and a soft cloth for cleaning. She reviewed notes from veterinary texts, double-checking treatments for vestibular infections common in canids. Knowledge grounded her, but emotions threaded through every choice. In the quiet room, shadows danced as the lantern flickered. She rehearsed her plan: approach Ember gently, respect his space, offer care without force. She would let trust guide the way. Yet a whisper of doubt lingered. Would Ember accept her help fully, or would her presence frighten him back into the forest's shadows? Hana's phone buzzed softly, a message from Ji-hoon reminding her of the upcoming community meeting on wildlife intervention ethics. She sighed, feeling the tension between science and sentiment, between rules and heart. This was not just about saving one fox. It was about navigating the complex relationship humans had with the wild. The balance, of power, respect, and responsibility. Hana's commitment would test those boundaries. She paused, fingers resting lightly on a faded photograph of Min-jae. His smile seemed to encourage her to move forward with compassion, to honor his memory by embracing the quiet courage that healing demands. Outside, the forest whispered, as if waiting with her. The next morning, Hana ventured into the woods with a small satchel of supplies and a heart full of cautious hope. The crisp air bit gently at her cheeks, the scent of pine and moist earth filling her lungs. She moved slowly, mindful not to disturb the delicate peace. Ember appeared again near the familiar clearing, his posture guarded but curious. His amber eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. Hana's voice was barely audible, a soft murmur of reassurance. She knelt, avoiding sudden movements, allowing Ember to set the pace. The decision to help was not a triumphant moment, but a gentle commitment, an acceptance of uncertainty, a willingness to walk alongside pain without demanding control. The ethical dilemma remained, a silent conversation between Hana and herself. Was intervention an act of kindness or interference? Could she balance her desire to heal with respect for Ember's autonomy? Ji-hoon's cautious perspective echoed in her mind, reminding her that sometimes the best help is the kind that preserves freedom, that does not bind but supports. Hana's resolve was tested in these moments of uncertainty, yet she chose compassion, trusting that healing could emerge from presence, patience, and respect. In the coming days, plans took shape. careful observations, gradual approaches, and the slow building of trust. Hannah prepared for setbacks, for moments when fear might drive Ember away. But she held to hope, the quiet fire that had carried her through loss and pain. As the sun rose over Jeju's rugged landscape, Hannah felt the faintest, a fragile promise of transformation, a promise not just of physical healing, but of connection that transcended words and species. She knew the journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but she embraced it fully, guided by the belief that sometimes the broken save the broken. The morning sun spilled golden light across the forest floor, illuminating patches of moss and scattered leaves that crunched softly underfoot. A gentle breeze whispered through the pines, carrying with it the mingled scents of earth, resin, and distant salt from the sea. In this quiet sanctuary, the fragile bond between Ember and Hannah teetered on a precipice, the delicate threshold between wary observation and tentative connection. Ember lingered near the familiar clearing, his amber eyes sharp but shadowed with the weight of his struggle. His movements remained cautious, each step measured against the invisible wobble that unsettled his balance. The infection in his ear continued to unsettle the world beneath him, but something new stirred within, a faint glimmer of trust towards the human who had remained a patient presence in his life. Hannah approached slowly, heart steady despite the rapid pulse beneath her ribs. She carried no weapons, no tools to impose control, only a small cloth dampened with warm herbal infusion, a gesture of care offered without demand. Her eyes held a softness that mirrored Ember's own guarded vulnerability. The red fox's body tensed as she drew closer, ears flicking in alert, muscles coiled to flee. Yet he did not run. Instead, he observed, weighing risk against a hope buried deep within his instinct. The scent of the herbs, familiar now, mingled with the crisp air and seemed to ease the sharp edges of his fear. In this moment, biology and emotion intertwined. Foxes, with their keen sense of smell and acute sensitivity to body language, are finely attuned to signals of threat or safety. Ember's decision to remain revealed a significant shift, a recognition that this human's presence might offer relief, not harm. Hannah knelt a few feet away, speaking in low, even tones. Her words were less important than the rhythm of her breathing, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the absence of sudden movements. She extended her hand slowly, palm open, inviting rather than commanding. Ember hesitated, nose twitching as he sampled the air. The natural wariness etched into his survival instincts warred with a growing curiosity. Then, with cautious grace, he stepped forward, lowering his head just enough to brush the edge of Hannah's fingers with the tip of his muzzle. The contact was brief, but monumental. The first physical bridge between their worlds. Hannah felt a tremor of emotion ripple through her, a silent acknowledgement of trust earned, of fear met with compassion. This was not a grand rescue scene filled with drama or haste. It was a tender dance of patience and presence. A fox, broken by pain and imbalance, chose to lean into connection. A woman, shaped by loss and hope, honored that choice without rush or expectation. Biologically, this interaction mirrored the delicate process of social bonding in wild canids. Trust builds through repeated gentle gestures, shared scents, calm postures, mutual respect. For Ember, whose inner ear infection compromised his physical certainty, this trust was a lifeline, a quiet reassurance that he need not face his struggle alone. The infection's effects remained ever present. Ember's gait was still unsteady, and he occasionally shook his head to ease the discomfort swirling within. Yet, in Hannah's presence, his movements held more confidence, more stillness amid the chaos. Hannah's hands moved with practiced care as she gently cleaned the fur around Ember's affected ear. The herbal salve soothed inflamed tissue, and the warmth of her touch brought a momentary calm. Ember flinched once but did not withdraw. A small victory that, spoke volumes. The forest around them was alive with subtle sounds, the distant chirp of cicadas, the rustle of leaves stirred by the breeze, the faint trickle of a nearby stream. These natural melodies wove a comforting tapestry, grounding both fox and human in the shared moment. Yet, even as hope blossomed, Hana remained acutely aware of the fragility ahead. Healing was not linear. Setbacks awaited. Trust could be fragile, easily shattered by a wrong move or a sudden noise. The ethical complexity she navigated daily pulsed beneath each interaction, the need to balance care with respect for Ember's independence. Jihoon's words echoed in her mind. We walk a fine line. Our help must not become their cage. Hana nodded silently to herself, committing to this delicate balance. She would walk beside Ember, not ahead, honoring his pace, his boundaries, his wildness. As the sun climbed higher, casting bright shafts of light through the canopy, Ember finally settled near Hana's feet. His body relaxed slightly, the first true sign of comfort in weeks. The fox's amber eyes closed briefly, a gesture of trust and surrender in this safe space. For Hana, the moment was a quiet triumph, a testament to the power of patience, empathy, and the profound connections that can emerge in silence. Their journey was just beginning, but this first touch, fragile, tentative, filled with unspoken promise, marked a turning point. A broken fox and a healing heart had found each other in the stillness of the forest, and in that shared quiet, hope took root. The first light of dawn crept softly over Jeju's rugged landscape, casting a gentle blush across the mist-wrapped forest. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the mingled scents of pine, damp earth, and salt from the distant sea. In this quiet hour, the world seemed poised between night's lingering shadow and the promise of a new day. Ember stirred Benny. At the shelter of a thick cedar, his russet fur ruffled slightly by the breeze. The faint tremor in his step remained, a constant reminder of the infection that unsettled his balance and shadowed his movements. Yet today, there was a subtle difference. A steadier gaze, a measured confidence in the placement of his paws, a fragile grace emerging from endurance. Hana watched from nearby, heart attentive to every nuance. Weeks had passed since their tentative first contact, and the journey of healing unfolded not in dramatic leaps, but in quiet progress, a tapestry woven from moments of breakthrough and setback. She had learned to read the language of recovery, the careful pause before a step, the flicker of ears, the soft blink of tired eyes. Each small sign carried weight, signaling whether Ember's strength grew or faltered. Her hands, once uncertain, moved now with practiced gentleness as she applied herbal salves to the inflamed ear, soothing tender tissue with warmth and care. The biology beneath Ember's struggle was complex. Vestibular infections disrupted the inner ear's labyrinth, a delicate network that governs balance and spatial orientation. Healing required time for inflammation to subside, nerves to repair, and the brain to relearn its internal map of the world. This process was neither swift nor assured, marked by moments when dizziness returned like a shadow, and the fox retreated into longer periods of rest. Yet within these fragile rhythms lay a profound resilience. Ember adapted by using his other senses more keenly, nose twitching to track scents, eyes focused on patterns in light and shadow, whiskers brushing against branches to gauge space. His body recalibrated slowly, relearning trust in itself. Hana, too, felt the transformation within herself. The caregiving deepened her understanding of patience, humility, and presence. Each day was an exercise in surrender, letting go of control and embracing the uncertain flow of healing. There were mornings when Ember's steps faltered sharply and Hana's breath caught with worry. On such days, she allowed herself quiet tears, mourning the fragility of life and the echo of her brother's fading balance. But these moments were met with renewed resolve, a commitment to accompany, not conquer. The forest around them became a sanctuary of healing. Dawn chorus birds sang their intricate melodies, dew sparkled like scattered gems on ferns, and the earthy perfume of moss and pine infused the air. These sensory details wove into their shared experience, grounding both fox and human in the cycle of renewal. Ember's trust deepened beyond the first hesitant touches. He accepted Hana's presence as part of his world, a steady heartbeat amid uncertainty. On slow afternoons, he would rest near her feet as she prepared herbal infusions or tended to other animals, their quiet companionship a balm for loneliness. Yet the path was not without challenge. One afternoon, a sudden bout of dizziness sent Ember stumbling near a rocky slope, a sharp breath escaping him as he struggled to steady his footing. Hana rushed to his side, steadying his head with gentle hands, whispering reassurance into the cool air. This setback was a stark reminder of the infection's persistent hold and the need for ongoing vigilance. Yet even in this moment of vulnerability, Ember's eyes held a fierce spark, a refusal to yield. Hana's knowledge of veterinary science informed her care, but her heart infused it with empathy. She balanced clinical understanding with reverence for Ember's wildness, honoring the autonomy beneath the fragility. Jihoon's voice echoed in her mind. Healing is a conversation, not a command. She carried this truth with her as she moved through the days, embracing both hope and humility. Each step forward was an act of courage. For Ember, navigating a world that sometimes spun beyond his control. For Hana, surrendering to a process that demanded patience and presence over urgency. As the seasons shifted toward winter's embrace, the forest grew quieter, the light softer. Yet beneath the cold exterior, the seeds of renewal took root. Ember's body grew stronger, his movement steadier. Hana's spirit grew lighter, buoyed by the trust they nurtured together. This healing journey was a shared path, a delicate balance of science and soul, of brokenness and resilience, of silence and connection. In the stillness of Jeju's forest, beneath the watchful gaze of ancient trees, two lives intertwined, slowly, gently, unshakably. The first light of spring dawned softly over Jeju Island, painting the landscape in tender hues of pale pink and green. Cherry blossoms bloomed delicately along the forest paths, their petals drifting on the gentle breeze like whispered promises of renewal. The air was warmer now, carrying the mingled scents of fresh earth, blooming flowers, and pine resin, a subtle chorus of life reawakening after winter's hush. In the heart of this transforming forest stood Ember, the once fragile red fox, now poised with renewed strength and quiet grace. His amber eyes gleamed with a clarity that had been clouded for months, reflecting not only physical healing, but a deeper, intangible transformation. The subtle head tilt that had once betrayed his inner turmoil had diminished to a faint reminder, a testament to endurance rather than limitation. Hana watched from a distance, a soft smile touching her lips as she observed Ember's confident stride. Their journey, woven with moments of patience, uncertainty, hope, and tenderness, had culminated in this fragile victory. Yet the change was not theirs alone. In healing Ember's wounds, Hana found a healing of her own. The slow, steady process had peeled back layers of grief and isolation, revealing reserves of strength and compassion she had long forgotten. The ghost of her brother's fading balance and silence had transformed into a living testament, an unspoken legacy carried forward through her care and presence. Transformation had unfolded quietly, without fanfare, in the spaces between breaths and the stillness of shared moments. It was a dance between two souls, human and wild, bound by trust and the sacredness of healing. Biologically, Ember's recovery mirrored the complex resilience of red foxes adapting to adversity. His nervous system had recalibrated, the inflamed inner ear slowly mended, his movements regained fluidity, hunting instincts sharpened, and sensory awareness deepened. Yet beyond biology, something more profound had shifted, a renewal of spirit, a reclamation of belonging. Hana felt this renewal as a gentle pulse within her chest, a quiet affirmation that healing transcended species and circumstance. It was a reminder that sometimes the broken save the broken. As the days lengthened and blossoms unfurled, Ember began to explore beyond the familiar clearing. His forays grew bolder, steps surer, though always measured with the care of someone who remembered fragility. Hana accompanied him at a distance, honoring his need for independence while remaining a steady presence. Their bond had evolved into a sacred trust, a mutual understanding shaped not by words, but by the rhythm of shared experience. Hana had learned to read the forest through Ember's eyes, to feel his fears and hopes in the tilt of his head and the flick of his tail. At night, she often sat beneath the stars, reflecting on the journey, its quiet trials and profound gifts. The transformation was not a neat conclusion, but a beginning, a step toward freedom and renewal. Preparations began for Ember's eventual return to full independence. Hana gathered supplies for final treatments, documented his progress with careful notes, and consulted with Ji-hoon and veterinary experts to ensure the transition honored both health and wildness. The decision weighed heavily: when to release, how to know the moment was right. It was a question without easy answers, emblematic of the complex dance between human intervention and nature's course. Yet Hana trusted the signs. Ember's steady gait, his confident gaze, the eagerness in his movements. He was ready. On a clear morning, bathed in soft sunlight, Hana led Ember to the edge of the forest where the wild awaited. The world stretched wide and open, a realm of scents, shadows, and freedom. Ember paused at the boundary, casting a long glance back. His amber eyes met Hana's steady gaze, holding a silent thank you that spoke of trust, grace, and the shared journey. This moment, the foxes looking back before stepping fully into the wild, was a sacred gesture, a bridge between worlds. Hana felt tears blur her vision, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. Their lives had been forever changed by this fragile bond, this slow, tender healing. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to share more journeys of quiet healing. Tell me in the comments, how has patience changed the way you connect with others? As Ember disappeared into the embrace of the forest, Hana stood rooted in the clearing, the scent of blossoms and pine filling the air. The transformation was complete, not an ending, but a new chapter written in trust, resilience, and love without words. In the healing of a wild fox, a woman had found her own renewal, and in the quiet, enduring bond between them, the forest whispered a timeless truth. Healing is often born in silence and stillness, in presence rather than action, in trust rather than control. The journey had changed them both, fragile, broken, yet unbreakable. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind Jeju's rugged volcanic peaks, bathing the forest in a warm, golden light that softened the edges of leaves and branches. The scent of blooming cherry blossoms lingered in the cool air, mingling with the rich earth and distant ocean salt. The forest seemed to hold a gentle hush, as if aware of the significance woven into this moment. Ember stood at the threshold where the cultivated garden met the wild woods, his amber eyes steady and clear. The subtle tilt in his head, once so pronounced, was now barely perceptible, a quiet reminder of the journey he had endured. The infection that had once threatened to unbalance him had loosened its grip, replaced by the slow, steady pulse of healing. For a long moment, Ember looked back, not with hesitation, but with something deeper, a silent acknowledgement, a final gift to the human who had walked beside him through pain and recovery. His gaze met Hana's, and in that unspoken exchange lay a universe of gratitude, trust, and the bittersweet weight of farewell. Hana's breath caught in her throat. The ache she felt was not sorrow, but reverence, a profound respect for the wildness she had come to love and the fragile bond that had bridged two worlds. She whispered a soft goodbye, a blessing carried on the wind. This was no ordinary farewell. It was the culmination of weeks of patient care, quiet companionship, and mutual transformation. In releasing Ember, Hana honored not only his freedom but the essence of trust, an invitation to live fully on his own terms. The ethical complexity of intervention had shadowed their path, but now it resolved into a delicate balance, care that empowers rather than confines, presence that heals without possession. Hana understood that love does not need to be loud to be real. Sometimes it is found in the stillness of letting go. Around them the forest seemed to breathe, a living tapestry woven with the sounds of rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the soft murmur of a nearby stream. The fading light painted everything in hues of amber and rose, a final embrace from the day. As Ember slipped into the thicket, his body moving with renewed strength and quiet purpose, Hana felt a lasting imprint settle in her heart. The fox's journey was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the wild, to the cycles of life that shaped all living things. Her thoughts drifted to the broader truths uncovered through this shared experience, the invisible struggles that so many bear, the silent battles hidden beneath calm facades, the power of presence, of bearing witness without demand, the healing that comes not from rushing or forcing, but from patience, trust, and respect. In the weeks since Ember's release, Hana found herself changed as well. The shadows of loss that had lingered around her softened, replaced by a renewed sense of connection and hope. The forest, with all its mystery and wisdom, had become a teacher and companion. She often returned to the clearing where Ember had last looked back, sitting quietly beneath the blooming trees, listening to the language of wind and water. In those moments, she felt the invisible threads linking all life, the fragile bonds of empathy and understanding that transcend species. Her gaze lifted to the stars beginning to twinkle in the twilight sky, and she whispered a question carried on the breeze. How do we honor the silent struggles of those around us? How do we hold space for healing when words fall short? These questions lingered, unanswerable yet profound, inviting reflection and connection. And as the forest settled into night, the promise of renewal and resilience remained, a quiet testament to the enduring power of trust and love lived in silence. If this story has touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. How have you experienced healing through presence rather than words? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that explore the quiet bonds between humans and the wild. The journey of Ember and Hana had come full circle, a story of brokenness met with compassion, of silence met with understanding, of two souls forever changed by a quiet, enduring trust. And in that trust, the forest whispered a timeless truth. Sometimes the most profound goodbyes are those spoken not with words, but with a lingering look, a promise that neither distance nor time can sever.